The guard at my back pressed closer as the Queen's procession halted without warning. Protocol demanded I keep moving, keep the perimeter tight, but Her Majesty had stopped in the middle of the merchant district with her primary eyes fixed on something below. I followed her gaze through the press of bodies, Vrakon traders, human refugees, Telexian negotiators, until I found what held her attention. A human male, gaunt as famine itself, stood before a jeweler's stall with his hand trembling over a tray of rings. The Queen's translator caller hummed. Clear a path. I wish to observe. My mandibles clicked once. Not agreement. Acknowledgement. The other guards fanned outward, creating a bubble of space that pushed back the crowd without force. We were thrown sentinels, and we moved like water finding its level. Inevitable, quiet, absolute. The human didn't notice us. His focus remained on the rings, and his hands shook so badly the jeweler had stepped back, clearly uneasy. I catalogued the details my training demanded. Human male, approximately 30 solar cycles. Clothes worn but clean. Boots repaired with mismatched thread. No visible weapons. Cheeks hollow, eyes sunken. Advanced malnutrition, possibly 8 to 10 planetary rotations without adequate food. Still, he stood straight. Still, his fingernails were clean. The contradiction interested me because contradictions meant unpredictability, and unpredictability meant threat assessment. How much? The human's voice cracked. Standard galactic, but his accent marked him as outer colony stock. Probably from one of the border systems the crush had burned. The jeweler, a Molteran with 4 arms and a merchant's wariness, named a price. I converted it automatically. 60 standard credits. The human reached into his jacket. My weapon hand twitched, pure reflex, and withdrew a plasteel card so scratched it caught the light like broken glass. He tapped it against the payment node. Declined. He tried again. Declined. A third time. I have the credits, the human said quietly. The account is frozen. Banking error. They said 3 days to resolve it. The jeweler's secondary arms folded. Then return in 3 days. I can't. Something in those 2 words made my sensory pits flare. Not threat. Something else. Something I had no protocol for. The funeral is tomorrow. The Queen moved forward. I moved with her, keeping the prescribed half-pace behind and to her left where my body could intercept projectiles aimed at her thorax. She was matriarch of the Throne Worlds, and I had watched her negotiate treaties that reshaped star systems, but I had never seen her approach a market stall before. Explain the funeral, she said. The human turned, and the blood drained from his already pale face. He dropped into a bow so clumsy his knees nearly buckled. Your Majesty, forgive me, I didn't rise. She gestured with one royal talon. Explain. He rose shakily. My brother's widow. They lived on Kethry's station. When the crash came, they had 15 minutes warning. He got her and their daughter onto an escape pod, but there wasn't room for him. She made it to the refugee ships. He didn't. She arrived here 4 days ago with nothing. No family, no possessions. Nothing except her daughter and the clothes they wore. The Queen's antennae angled forward. Maximum attention. And the ring? Human tradition, Your Majesty. When a married person dies, the family gives the widow or widower a ring. It's called an honor ring. Black band, single stone. It means they weren't alone. That someone witnessed their loss and says your grief is real and we stand with you. His voice fractured. She has no one else to give it to her. I'm his brother. It's my duty. But I haven't eaten in 6 days because I've been saving every credit, and it's still not enough, and the funeral is tomorrow, and I can't... He stopped. Drew a breath that whistled through what sounded like fluid in his lungs. Started again. I won't let her stand at that memorial without someone honoring what she lost. Silence. The crowd had grown, drawn by the Queen's presence, but no one spoke. I scanned faces automatically. No threats. Only curiosity and the peculiar stillness that came when something unexpected was happening. The Queen turned to the jeweler. The ring. Give it to him. The Molteran's eyes widened. Your Majesty, I run a business. I cannot simply... You can. She produced a credit chip from the ceremonial pouch at her chest. Royal Reserve funds. I had seen her use them once before to pay ransom for hostages. I will purchase it. He will deliver it. The accounting is simple. The jeweler took the chip, verified it, and went still in the way his species did when shocked. The amount on that chip could have purchased his entire stall 3 times over. He selected a ring, simple black band, small dark stone, and placed it in a box lined with white cloth. The human took it with both hands. His fingers had stopped shaking. "Your Majesty, I can't repay you. I have nothing. You've honored a widow who lost everything when your species stood against an enemy that outnumbered you 40-1. You have starved yourself to uphold a tradition that says grief deserves witness." The Queen's eyes, all 6 of them, fixed on him. "Tell me, human, if you had succeeded in purchasing this ring, what would you have done about food?" "Somehow, starving and broken," he met it. "I would have figured something out." "After the funeral, how many days can your species survive without food?" "Depends on the person. Maybe another week. If I'm careful." The Queen gestured. "One of my fellow guards, Takresh, moved forward with a ration pack from our supplies, military grade. Enough calories for 3 days. The human stared at it like he couldn't process what it meant. "Eat," the Queen said, "then attend your funeral. Then report to the Refugee Services Center in the Administrative District and tell them Queen Shalvis sent you. They will find you work." "I don't understand. Why would you—" "Because I have spent 40 cycles studying your species, trying to comprehend why you fight when logic says you should flee, why you sacrifice when mathematics says you should preserve yourselves, why you destroy your own survival for concepts that have no tactical value. Today I witnessed a man choose starvation to honor a stranger's grief." Her antennas swept back, the gesture her species used for deep thought. "Perhaps I am beginning to understand." She turned. I moved with her. The crowd parted. Behind us, I heard the human make a sound like his composure had finally shattered, but when I glanced back, just a flick of my secondary eyes, he was clutching the ring box to his chest and the ration pack in his other hand, and he was still standing. We returned to the palace. The Queen said nothing during the transport. I maintained my position and my silence, as protocol demanded, but something had shifted. Some calculation I didn't have the context to complete. That evening she summoned me to her private office. I entered to find her at her viewing wall, the screen displaying footage of human refugee camps, human soldiers, human civilians rebuilding bombed cities with their bare hands. "Sentinel Krevmoth," she said without turning. "In your assessment, would that human have let himself die?" I considered. "Yes, Your Majesty. If the funeral had passed without him fulfilling his duty, I believe his will to survive would have failed. For a tradition, for a symbol, for what the symbol represents." She turned then. "And what does it represent? That some things matter more than survival." Her antennae angled upward. "Approval. Dismissed." I left, returned to my post. That night I dreamed, which throne sentinels rarely did, of a human standing at a grave, placing a black ring into the hands of a widow who had lost everything, and both of them crying while around them a universe burned and they chose grief over safety, ceremony over sustenance. 3 days later, the Queen addressed the Council of Allied Worlds. She proposed full refugee integration status for all human survivors, full citizenship, full rights. The proposal had been stalled for months, blocked by species who feared human unpredictability, human emotion, human refusal to calculate survival in purely mathematical terms. The debate lasted 6 hours. When delegates demanded justification, the Queen told them about the ring, about the human who chose starvation over broken tradition, about a species that would rather die than abandon the idea that grief deserved witness, that loss deserved honor, that some duties transcended logic. The measure passed. Barely, but it passed. And I understood, finally, why she had stopped that day, why she had watched. Why she had paid a fortune for a simple ring, because she had seen what I had seen, that humanity's greatest strength and their most terrible vulnerability were the same thing. They would sacrifice everything for ideas that existed only in their hearts. They would die for beliefs that had no physical form. They would starve themselves to honor the dead. It made them dangerous. It made them irrational. It made them impossible to predict or control or fully understand. It also made them something the galaxy had never seen before, something worth saving, something worth standing beside when the universe demanded you choose between what was logical and what was right. Months passed. The human, his name was David Chen, I learned later from the integration files, found work in the administrative sector. Coding. Database, management, nothing glamorous. He sent half his earnings to his brother's widow every month. The other half he saved. I knew this because the Queen asked me to monitor him, not as threat assessment, as something else. curiosity, maybe. Or verification of a theory she was building about his species. One evening, he appeared at the palace gates. I was on perimeter duty, and I recognized him immediately despite the weight he'd regained. The color returned to his face. He carried a package wrapped in simple cloth. "I need to see the Queen," he said to the gate sentinel. "Civilians require appointments scheduled 14 days in advance. Please, tell her it's David Chen. Tell her it's about the ring." The gate sentinel's mandibles clicked with dismissal, but I stepped forward. "I will convey the message." The Queen received him in the formal greeting hall, which surprised me. She rarely granted audience to individuals without political significance. I stood at my post, watching him approach the throne with that same clumsy bow he'd given in the market. He had practiced it, I noticed. It was still imperfect, but the respect behind it was genuine. "Your Majesty." His voice was steady now. "I came to repay my debt." "There is no debt. It was a gift. With respect, ma'am, in my culture there's always a debt when someone saves your life. You gave me food when I was dying. You gave me work when I had nothing. You gave me the ability to honor my brother's memory." He held out the package. "I can't repay the money. But I can give you something else." She gestured for me to retrieve it. I took the package, scanned it for threats, clean, and brought it to her. She unwrapped it carefully. Inside was a book. Handmade. The pages were real paper, stitched together with thread. The cover was plain plasteel, but someone had engraved it with care. The title read Human Funeral Traditions, a Complete Guide. The Queen's antenna went perfectly still. In her species, that meant profound focus. "I wrote it," David said. "I thought you said you'd spent 40 cycles trying to understand humans. I thought maybe this would help. It's not just about funerals. It's about why we do them." What they mean. How different cultures approach death and grief and remembrance. He paused. I interviewed 200 refugees, asked them about their traditions, their beliefs, their reasons. I wanted you to understand that what you saw that day wasn't special. It's just what we are. The Queen opened the book. I couldn't see the pages from my position, but I saw her eyes move across them. Saw her talon trace words. Saw something in her posture shift. "You interviewed 200 individuals, compiled their traditions, analyzed their beliefs, wrote this entire volume." She looked up. "How long did this take?" 4 months. I worked on it every evening after my job. Weekends, too. "Why?" "Because you didn't have to help me. You didn't have to care. You're a queen, and I'm nobody. A refugee. A guy who couldn't even afford a ring." "But you stopped. You listened. You acted like my grief mattered." His voice roughened. "In my culture, when someone shows you that kind of honor, you honor them back. You witness their curiosity the way they witnessed your pain." The silence stretched. I could hear the environmental systems humming. Could hear David's breathing, slightly elevated. Could hear the rustle of pages as the Queen turned them. There are entries here on death rights from Earth, from the colony worlds, from the generation ships, from the mining stations. She kept reading. "From cultures that no longer exist because the crush destroyed them. You documented traditions from extinct civilizations." "Yes, ma'am. I thought someone should remember. Even if the people are gone, maybe their traditions shouldn't be." The Queen closed the book, held it against her chest the way David had held the ring box. "Sentinel Krevmoth." I stepped forward. "Your Majesty, ensure this volume is copied and distributed to every embassy, every cultural center, every integration facility in the Allied worlds. I want our scholars to study it, our diplomats to reference it, our people to understand it." She looked at David. "And I want the original preserved in the Royal Archives, where the most important documents in our civilization's history are kept." David's eyes went wide. "Your Majesty, I'm not a scholar. This isn't academic work. It is a human who nearly died spending 4 months of his recovered life documenting why his species chooses meaning over survival. It is proof that what I witnessed in the market was not an anomaly but a fundamental truth about your kind." She stood, which made David stumble backward because protocol said civilians didn't stand in the presence of a standing monarch. "It is evidence that we were right to grant you sanctuary, right to offer you citizenship, right to stand beside you against the crush, even when the mathematics said we would lose." She descended from the throne, approached him, extended her talon in the human gesture of handshake she'd been practicing since the integration began. David took it, and I saw tears on his face. "You have given me a gift far greater than you understand." the Queen said. "You have given me the beginning of an answer to the question that has haunted me since the first human stood before the Kresh Armada and chose to fight." "You have shown me that your species doesn't calculate survival in terms of biology. You calculate it in terms of meaning, and you would rather die with meaning than live without it." She released his hand. "I am honored to have witnessed your grief, David Chen, and I am honored that you chose to witness my curiosity." He left the palace that evening carrying nothing but the Queen's gratitude and a payment voucher that would have made him wealthy. He donated it to the Refugee Integration Fund. I know because I processed the transaction personally. The book became required reading for all diplomatic staff. Within a year, citations from it appeared in policy documents across the Allied worlds. Within 3 years, it had been translated into 47 languages. Within 5, human cultural liaisons were teaching courses based on its framework. And every year, on the anniversary of the day the Queen stopped in the market, she attended a memorial service for the human refugees who died during the Kresh invasion. She stood with the widows and widowers. She listened to their stories. And at the end, she personally gave each new widow an honor ring, black band, single stone, purchased from her own funds. I asked her once why she did it, why she spent her time attending funerals for people who had no political power, no strategic value, no tactical significance. She looked at me with all 6 eyes and said, "Because David Chen taught me that witnessing grief is not a weakness. It is the foundation of civilization. Any species can calculate survival. Only the truly evolved choose to honor what survives." The war with the Kresh ended in our 8th year. The humans fought like demons. They died in numbers that made our strategists weep. They held positions that should have broken. They sacrificed themselves for allies who had doubted them. And when the final Kresh fleet retreated into dark space, swearing never to return to this region of the galaxy, it was because they had finally understood what the Queen learned in a market stall. Humanity didn't fight to survive. They fought because some things mattered more than survival. They fought because they had decided the galaxy was worth saving, and once they decided something mattered, they would starve themselves, sacrifice themselves, die themselves before they abandoned it. At the victory celebration, the Queen gave a speech. She talked about courage and sacrifice and the alliance that had saved civilization, but at the end, she held up a small black ring with a single dark stone and told the story of a human who chose starvation over broken tradition, who chose honor over hunger, who chose meaning over mathematics. "This," she said, holding the ring high so every delegate in the chamber could see it, "is why we won. Because we stood beside a species that understands something we had forgotten. That civilization is not measured by how well we survive. It is measured by what we refuse to abandon, even when survival demands it." The chamber erupted in approval. Every species, every delegate, every representative standing and acknowledging the truth. But I watched the Queen, and I saw her eyes find David Chen in the crowd. He had been invited as an honored civilian, though he tried to refuse, and I saw the small nod she gave him. He nodded back, and I understood that this was its own kind of tradition, its own kind of honor ring. 2 beings from different species witnessing each other's grief and curiosity and growth across the years, saying without words, "You mattered. Your pain was real. Your question was worthy. Your choice was seen." I stood at my post, as I always did. But something had changed in me, too. I had spent my entire life believing that protocol and logic and tactical assessment were the highest forms of intelligence. I had been trained to calculate threat, to measure risk, to prioritize survival above all else. Now I knew better. I had watched a human choose starvation to honor grief. I had watched a queen choose curiosity over dismissal. I had watched a species decide that meaning mattered more than mathematics, and in doing so, save themselves and everyone who stood beside them. That night, I requested permission to attend the next memorial service. The Queen granted it immediately, as if she'd been waiting for me to ask. I stood in the back, watching humans and aliens alike share stories of those they'd lost, watching them cry and laugh and remember, watching them give honor rings to widows and widowers who had lost everything except the knowledge that their grief was witnessed and their loss was real. When it ended, David Chen found me near the exit. "Sentinel Krevmoth," he said quietly. "Thank you for being here. I am simply observing." He smiled. It was a sad expression, but genuine.
"No, you're witnessing."
"There's a difference." And he was right. I wasn't calculating or assessing or measuring threat. I was witnessing, seeing pain and honoring it, acknowledging that some things mattered more than tactics. understanding that the human who had stood at that jeweler's stall, starving and desperate and absolutely certain of his duty, had changed the galaxy simply by refusing to abandon what mattered to him. Years later, when I retired from active service, the Queen asked me what I wanted as my ceremonial gift. Every throne sentinel received one upon retirement, usually weapons or property or titles. I requested something different. I requested a copy of David Chen's book, bound in the traditional materials of my species, to be kept in my personal quarters. She gave it to me herself. An unusual choice for a warrior, she said. I am no longer just a warrior, Your Majesty. I am someone who learned that witnessing matters as much as fighting. That honor is not weakness. That a human choosing starvation to fulfill a duty is worth more than 1,000 calculated victories. She clicked her mandibles.
Approval.
Then you have become something rare, Krevmoth. A being who understands that strength is not measured only in what you can destroy, but in what you refuse to abandon. I carried that book home, read it cover to cover, learned about human traditions for honoring the dead, for witnessing grief, for saying through ritual and symbol and sacrifice that pain deserves acknowledgement and loss deserves memory. And I understood, finally, completely, why the galaxy was different after humanity joined it. They had taught us that survival was not enough, that victory without meaning was hollow, that civilization required not just strength but the courage to care about things that couldn't be quantified or calculated or reduced to tactical advantage. They had shown us that sometimes the most important choice was not the logical one, but the one that honored what mattered even when it cost everything. The ring I never saw again. The widow David gave it to wore it until she died 30 years later, surrounded by children and grandchildren who had survived because someone starved himself to honor her loss. The ring was buried with her, as human tradition demanded, but the impact of that moment, a queen stopping, a human explaining, a choice being witnessed, rippled outward forever. Humanity, fuck yeah, not because they were the strongest or the smartest or the most advanced, but because they understood something the rest of us had forgotten or never known. That meaning matters. That grief deserves witness, that some duties transcend logic. That a species willing to starve itself to honor the dead is a species worth standing beside when the universe demands you choose between what is rational and what is right. I learned that in a market stall, watching a transaction that made no sense and changed everything. And I carry it still, in the book on my shelf, and the memory in my mind, and the understanding in my core that the galaxy is better because humanity decided some things were worth dying for, and then refused to die until those things were honored. The ring was small, the gesture was simple. The impact was infinite, and somewhere in the archives of the throne worlds, preserved for all time, is a handmade book explaining why a human chose starvation over broken tradition, and why a queen chose curiosity over dismissal, and why both of those choices saved civilization. Because witness matters, honor matters, meaning matters, and humanity, fuck yeah, taught us all what that actually means.